This is Paul Schneiderman today on the 28th edition of Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio. Wow, it's the 28th episode today. I have a special guest, Dave Gravenkemper. Dave, I will give a little introduction of you, the listeners. I've known Dave for many years, an old Seattle friend. Dave Gravenkemper has 20-plus years of experience in sales, service, and operations on the ticketing and marketing side of sports. He's been a manager of some sports ticketing campaigns. Dave has worked for various pro sports franchises that include the Seattle Mariners, the Seattle Supersonics, Tampa Bay Devil Rays, and several others. Dave, for nearly a decade, in 2006 through 2015, was the Associate Athletic Director, Ticket Sales, Services, and Operations, University of Washington. Dave managed ticket operations for 9 sports with an annual attendance of over 600,000. Dave worked for a year in Australia for the Australia Baseball League, Major League Baseball International in Sydney, Australia. I'm definitely going to ask you about your experience in Australia, Dave.
Absolutely.
Dave also worked recently for the Seattle Sports Commission, and he did some work for the Seattle Seawolves, the 2018 Major League Rugby Championship team. Today, we're going to learn more about Dave's career and his thoughts about all sorts of happenings in the sports marketing and ticket worlds. I advise my listeners to follow Dave Gravenkemper on Twitter, and you can see all sorts of interesting posts about the sports ticketing industry. Go to D. Gravenkemper, or I should say at D. Gravenkemper at Twitter. Dave, thanks for coming on Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Absolutely. Dave, I'm going to go a little out of chronological order here. I want to hear first about your work for the Seattle Seawolves. Founded in 2017, the Seawolves, as I mentioned in the introduction, are the 2018 Major League Rugby champions. What type of work did you do for the Seawolves, Dave? And do you see rugby becoming bigger one day in the United States?
Yeah, so, I was working for the Seattle Sports Commission for about a year, and I met the owner of the Seawolves during my time there, Shane Skinner, who's actually a Madison Park resident, a great guy. And Shane and I connected after I left the Sports Commission, and he had already launched his ticket sales program for the team. They play at Starfire down at Tequila, where the Sounders train, and he needed some ticketing expertise to come in and help just top off what he'd done from a season ticket standpoint, and then moving into the season, getting into group sales, single game promotions, and different distribution points for tickets. And it's a small stadium down there, only 3,500, and the goal is to sell out every game down there, and we did.
Great. And did you enjoy working in the sport of rugby?
It's great, yeah. So I didn't know much about rugby until I went to Australia, and we're probably going to touch on that later. But that's one of the biggest sports in Australia, and I know it's a fast-growing sport here in the U.S. So it was really interesting for me to come back from a country that was very passionate, loving that sport, and coming and helping grow that new pro league, the Major League Rugby, here in the States. And, it is one of the fastest growing sports, and the level of play is high quality, and it was a great experience.
It's neat you had that Australia experience that you brought back to the States. Well, we will talk about that later. Well, by the way, Dave, I think this is the first time the sport of rugby has come up on any of my shows. So I think this is fun to be able to hit on the sport. Although it's brief, we can have a little bit of a rugby conversation.
Yep,
this
not
is
a surprise.
This is Paul Schneiderman of Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio with veteran sports industry ticket executive David Gravenkemper. Dave, I want to ask you about this. You may have mentioned this to me years ago, but I actually don't remember the answer. Tell us how you broke in the sports ticketing and sales business back in about the mid-1990s.
Yeah, going way back. So you and I grew up coming to all the sporting events in Seattle. We're both big fans of all of our teams, and that was back in the 80s when the Sonics were still here and doing well, and Don James had turned UW around. The Mariners had joined the ranks. The Seahawks had joined the ranks as well. So we were kind of in the infant stage of being, Seattle sports fans. And so I'd been a big sports fan ever since I can remember, and it was always a passion of mine. So baseball turned into one of my favorite sports over time. I was in one of the first fantasy rotisserie baseball leagues in high school. And getting out of high school, I had the crazy idea of being a GM, just like, a lot of us sports nuts did, making trades and dealing with players. Back in the 90s, the way to break into baseball, if you weren't a player, was to sell tickets. So my first job was with the Tacoma Rainiers. I sat on a bar stool in the ticket office, literally cold called out of a phone book. And as crazy as it was, I loved it, and continued on to move in as a career. selling tickets as opposed to going onto the baseball side, which was impossible at the time. There's no Billy Bean or Moneyball back then. It was
Right.
all players that, former players that became scouts, and then they moved up the ranks that way. So, but the business side was very interesting to me, being a business major and going that direction.
I love how you started on the bar stool at Tacoma Rainier. It's a fun story.
Yes.
Dave, we're gonna hit on a potpourri of subjects today. We're gonna hit on your career more, and all sorts of contemporary ticket issues as well. Dave, I want to ask you a question about subscription ticketing. It's been compared to Netflix or Hulu, where fans can, with some usually limited restrictions, basically still go to as many games as they want at a modest expense. I learned, for example, David, in Atlanta, that Atlanta sports tickets are also linked to seeing concerts and other events in Atlanta. I sort of compare it to like that city pass you can buy to go on tours of a city and you can see miscellaneous sites. Dave, give us some of your thoughts about subscription ticketing, and is this the present and the future in the sports ticketing business?
I think it's a great concept. I think that there's a lot of work to do behind the scenes. I haven't looked at Atlanta's version myself, but taking Seattle, for example, and you've got all these different teams that are all looking for new fans and new participation points, but it's a matter of getting them all to the table and making an agreement with all of themselves to come and do like a combo type ticket where, it's kind of like a punch card where you can punch
Right.
it for, Sounders, Mariners, Huskies, Seawolves, whatever the teams are that are in the table. I think it's a great concept, but I'm not sure how it works down in Atlanta. But I think that is a direction that could happen, just in general. And there's need for flexibility. So a lot of colleges these days are coming out with what they call Flex Pass, where it's just a pass that you pay a lesser value than a season ticket. You don't know where the tickets are, but you get to pick the games you want to come to, and then you get your ticket like 24 hours in advance. It's assigned to you from the ticket office, and that's a great way to go as well. So flexibility is a big issue in sports tickets.
It's not our grandparents' sports tickets anymore, is it, David?
Definitely not. And they're still going to the games, and there's still a need for that as well. But the traditional, hard tickets and all the picture tickets for souvenirs that are going out to grandkids and those kinds of things. But really, the general trend is getting more mobile and flexibility.
Well, this is a great segue to my next question and topics for you, Dave. And we talked about this briefly off the air. There's a Nathan Hubbard, formerly of Ticketmaster and Twitter. He's now starting a company, Rival, and I believe the company is going to get formally going in about 2019. And Dave, you can help probably fill in some gaps on it. But Rival apparently is an identity-based and mobile-focusing ticketing system that allows teams to easily select how to distribute inventory. Two questions for you, Dave, on this. Hubbard commented that season tickets are dead. He came out and said that in an interview. Here's two questions for you, Dave. Number one, would you go as far as Mr. Hubbard in believing that season tickets are done, or do you think season tickets are just more evolving? My second question here is, tell us whether you think another company can fit in the secondary and ticket consolidation business. I know that Ticketmaster and StubHub are so big. So I got two questions for you. Start with the first one about whether you agree with Hubbard that season tickets are dead.
I have a lot of respect for Nathan Hubbard. I haven't met him, but I've seen him speak, and we've followed each other on Twitter. And he was at Ticketmaster when UW was at Ticketmaster as well. So I know a fair amount about his background. But I respectfully disagree. I don't think season tickets are dead. I think the traditional way of selling season tickets is in big trouble. Just packaging all your tickets into one subscription, so to speak, and selling them that way, especially with the more event sports like baseball and basketball and hockey, is really challenging. But at the same time, season tickets, I mean, the way to get over the loss of folks that are buying full season tickets is to add more value.
Interesting.
And I think a lot of teams and colleges out there, if they're adding more value to the proposition to keep season tickets and donors in college athletics perspective on board, because that's the bread and butter. That's the bread and butter of an organization. I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon.
And Dave, you mentioned earlier that off the air that Amazon tried to break in, I believe, to the ticket business. Can you see this Rival company making it and competing with Ticketmaster and StubHub?
It's going to be tough. I mean, Amazon, like I said, gave it a shot 2 years ago and pulled the plug after a year because I think that Ticketmaster is so ingrained relationship wise with Live Nation, actually owns Ticketmasters from a concert standpoint and a venue standpoint. They've got, lengthy contracts signed up with a lot of the teams. So it's a really tough nut to break, but
Seems like it.
Yeah, but there are competitors out there that are doing a pretty good job. I mean, Paciolan's a company that specializes in college athletics. Tessitura is a company that specializes in performing arts. So I think that if you can pull off a chunk and become a specialist in a certain area, I think that there is room to grow there. And, having been on Ticketmaster, I love the system. I think it's one of the best, but at the same time, there's holes. I mean, there's opportunity there. And Nathan Hubbard, being as smart as he is and having worked there and seeing under the hood, he might be the guy to do it.
Well, excuse the quip, Dave. I really enjoy all your inside baseball on the ticket industry. Lots of interesting stuff today. This is Paul Schneiderman on Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio with veteran sports ticket industry executive Dave Gravenkemper. Dave, I'm reading that we're starting to see a membership model for tickets that, I don't know if it's replacing season ticket holders, but seems to be less of a one-size-fit-all ticket type plan that can create different levels and unique experiences for fans. I read, for example, Dave, I found this really interesting. The St. Louis Cardinals are now offering a social season ticket where one can have a standing room only seat and be able to walk around and enjoy stadium restaurants. That's pretty unique. What are some creative membership style ticketing strategies that you like, Dave?
Yeah, so I think that is a compelling way to go about recreating a season ticket. Typically, tickets are a main portion of a membership, but that's the way they do it in Australia. That's what they do in Great Britain. All the EPL teams, they bring in members, and then tickets are a part of your membership. So I do see that progressing and becoming a bigger play out there. The Sounders, when they started 10 years ago, they took that concept and they actually sell memberships as opposed to season tickets. It's part of the season ticket. So I think it's a great way to go. I think one to keep an eye on is the Oakland A's. They just released what they call an all-access pass, which is the same kind of thing where it's a membership-based situation. A lot of flexibility with different tickets. They get discounts off of concessions and parking potentially. So it'll be good to keep an eye on that one. And I think that the Cardinals, it's a brilliant idea, is to really harness the millennial crowd out there. I think, a lot of different teams have tried different approaches. The Mariners with the, their center field, the bullpen area. The Cardinals is a great idea to get the younger fan more engaged and out to the ballpark.
It's also probably a way to get more casual fans in the park as well.
I think so. And I think that's, I think when you look at the demographics, especially in baseball, it skews to being an older generation. So I don't think that's, they're probably not going to come in on a social pass or a general admission ticket, but certainly, guys our age, we're not that old yet. To give that a shot, I think that's got some legs there too.
We're not kids anymore though, Dave.
We're not.
Dave, I'm also reading a lot about, and I know the Huskies have this and some Seattle sports teams have this, dynamic pricing where tickets are being sold like stocks, where the bigger games are going for more. I suppose it's a bit of a supply and demand issue, Dave. Any way you think, Dave, this concept could just backfire? A lot of fans are just going to get sick of paying for more expensive games.
Yeah, so it's a loaded question. Dynamic pricing's been around for a good 10, 12 years. In fact, I brought that to UW when we opened the new stadium and was on the inside for a lot of those decisions and pricing dynamics. I think it's a really good concept to price it by market. When you look at the secondary market, so many seats are selling so far above face value or even way below for a Monday night Mariner game, for example. That I think that there needs to be a balance from the teams. I think dynamic pricing has been a good attempt at that. I think what we did at UW, which was maybe better than what a lot of the pro teams are doing, is that we actually lowered prices as well. So you probably didn't pay attention to it because you have season tickets, but especially for basketball, we moved that up and down.
That's right.
Quite a bit, depending on how sales were going and trying to meet the market price for those seats. Now, do we end up selling more single game tickets? I don't know if we did or not, but I think that we were able to capture some extra revenue for those more important games. But at the same time, we were trying to get more fans to come out to the low demand games, and I think that it worked.
Dave, at the University of Washington, you managed a professional staff for nearly a decade, and you implemented some very interesting changes in the UW ticket front. And I think you will definitely have a long-lasting imprint there. Dave, are the days of big-time universities running mom-and-pop ticket operations seem to be over? But I have a question for you, though. I remember growing up in Seattle. We both grew up in this town. And I remember my late dad used to always say that the University of Washington tickets were something that a middle-class family could enjoy and something that could bring out a lot of families that maybe even in that era, 70s and 80s, the pro sports games were a little too much for families in that era too. What do you think, Dave? A lot of middle-class fans seem to be getting priced out of big-time college sports as well. Should this be a long-term concern for big-time college sports?
Yeah, I think it should be a concern. I think that a lot of colleges are now taking a step back from increasing all the prices and donations and really taking a look at the pro model again, where typically there are seats that are affordable. A lot of them are expensive, but they keep a decent balance of having affordable tickets as well. So we were very conscious of that when we opened the new Husky Stadium. There's a lot of different, value reserved was one area that we created. The East End Zone, we kept that as an affordable seating option.
Right.
It's more expensive than it was before, but at the same time, you can still, go to a Husky game and bring your family and not feel like that you're getting gouged when you're sitting in some of those areas. So I think that's really important for all colleges to be able to keep that balance where you're being able to bring in the youth, because those are the future students of the university and the future donors down the road. So you got to make sure you keep them engaged with your product.
Those are great points, Dave. It's interesting that you were and the ticket staff were cognizant of that. A lot of people are getting priced out. It seems like you took some steps to try to have some tickets that were more affordable. If you're just tuning in on Sports and Stuff, this is Paul Schneiderman of Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio with veteran sports ticketing expert Dave Gravenkemper. Dave, I looked at your Twitter account again, your Twitter page this week, and you have so many interesting posts from various writers about the sports ticketing industry from around the country. Just great stuff. If you go to Dave Gravenkemper's Twitter page, I think any fan will find a lot of interesting stuff. And you had a post this week that I read that was really interesting, written by Dave Wakeman. And Dave writes, the biggest problem with the sports ticket right now is demand. And give me a second, it's a little bit of a mouthful. But one issue, of course, is how online access can be really easy for a lot of sporting events now. I mean, geez, we could turn on Facebook and watch a Mariners game now. But Mr. Wakeman writes about several factors that have reduced demand, such as millennials just have different viewing and spending habits than other generations. He writes it's easier to get tickets now in the secondary market. He makes an interesting point. For example, U2, to get people to concerts, is offering free records. One thing that Wakeman writes, Dave, is he thinks that teams and universities need to offer more incentives to get people to buy tickets earlier. He suggests that the sports teams and universities should have more of an airline style price fluctuation system where the ticketing cost can really change. What's your take, Dave, on universities and pro sports franchises converting to more of an airline ticket pricing system?
Yeah, well, it gets back to dynamic pricing. So I think that's an attempt to get to the airline pricing model. Again, at UW, we were conscious of going up and down. So, to try and keep trending with the market. A lot of pro teams, they don't go down. So they just go up. And I think that's where they run into some trouble or challenges with folks buying tickets as you get closer to the game, because the price only goes up, which isn't market demand. So, I think that the industry itself is moving in that direction. And, to his point, he's spot on with trying to add more value and more incentives to get people to buy, which gets back to your traditional season tickets. They should be the most incentivized and throw in the most value add for someone who's committing to the full season before someone who's buying a single game ticket.
And Dave, you and I are both big baseball fans. You mentioned earlier the Oakland A's are implementing kind of a unique membership style ticket system. So this is what Wakeman wrote about in his recent column. It's probably something Major League Baseball can learn from a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Dave, real quickly, and I want to get into your experience in Australia. That's one of many reasons I wanted to have you on. But the U.S. Supreme Court recently ruled in a gambling case. There was a challenge to the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, and the Supreme Court this year basically is giving ruled that states should have more latitude on the question of sports gambling. Any thoughts on this is going to affect ticket sales, that sports gambling laws are going to be more liberalized?
I venture to guess it might help a little bit. Just it'll again grasp more of the casual fan into sports events. They're going to want to actually go to the events or be more inclined to go to an event than if they're not betting on it. I think gambling is a really interesting topic in the U.S. Again, having lived in Australia where they're very liberal, you can walk into any pub and place a bet on any sporting event, even in America. So I think that by letting down the guard a little bit, it's going to help increase interest in sports and hopefully have a positive effect on ticket sales. But, there's the challenge of just the in-home experience is so much better than it was when we were growing up, even just within the last 10 years, that's always going to be a tough competition for anybody who's trying to sell tickets.
We'll have to see what happens to that. That's the reason why I asked the question, is the idea of more gambling. As a result, more people staying home or more people going to games? So you gave an interesting answer. It's really kind of a wait and see thing, isn't it?
It is. And the combat there is that if you're at home, you can still place bets during a game, at least in Australia you can, on your mobile phone. So, it kind of defeats the purpose of going. But, a lot of people when they gamble, they want to watch. So that's why horse race tracks still exist. People want to go to the live event and be able to put some money down. So
I really like your point about horse racing tracks, that people love to gamble and attend the horse racing matches. So that's an interesting point. Paul Schneiderman, again, host of Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio with the sports ticketing guru, Dave Gravenkemper. Dave, I know you spent a year in Australia, and you lived there with your wife and children for a year, and you worked for the Australian Baseball League. Tell us about your experience for a minute or two in Australia working for the Australian Baseball League.
Wow. We only have a few minutes, but I could go on for days talking about the experience. It's an amazing country. I don't know if you've been to Australia or any of the listeners.
Love to get there. Never been there.
It's a bucket list thing. Get down there, even just to visit. Awesome country. But, it's one of those opportunities for me to go down there. Again, I started off my career in baseball. I've always been intrigued to get back into baseball on some level. We opened Husky Stadium, and after we'd gotten through that project, the next goal was to sell out the season. And I was geeked up to do that at first, but after the first year, Chris Peterson, I kind of lost maybe a little bit of momentum for that. So I started to look around, and this opportunity came up to go down with Major League Baseball to help them with this fledgling baseball league to grow fan support and attendance and ticket revenue for. I
know you played a role in increasing ticket sales in that league and so forth.
Yes, I mean, in fairness, I didn't have a whole lot of time to be able to implement a lot of the things that I wanted to, but in a year we did make some progress. But going down there, I don't know if you remember, but Major League Baseball opened their season probably 4 years ago now. The Dodgers and Diamondbacks, MLB put that on. They sold out the series. There's a lot of momentum and interest in trying to grow fan support down there. So I I jumped at the opportunity to go down there. It was more entrepreneurial than anything I'd ever done. It was an amazing experience.
You were in the Sydney area, right? You and your wife and kids. Yeah,
yes, we're in Sydney.
What was it like as an American living in Australia? Did no problems at all? Things go pretty smoothly?
Yeah, so we were there pre-Trump. So, there are two questions that were always asked from anybody we met. One is, what are your thoughts on gun control? Because they're banned down there. And then what are your thoughts on Trump? And you can imagine what their feelings are on both topics.
I bet. And those are definitely two questions I think Americans get when they're abroad. Do you see baseball, Dave, taking off big time in Australia one day? I know like Ryan Rowland-Smith, former Mariner, current broadcasters of Australian descent, Graham Lloyd, I believe. There's a few Australian Major League Baseball players. Can you see it taking off there one day?
I think it can grow for sure, but a lot of people don't know this, but they've been playing baseball in Australia for 100 years. So it's not a new sport by any means. They've had, some handful of Australians have played in the majors over the years. And, I think it's still a niche sport. So it's like rugby here in the US. It's just a niche sport. It's going to be tough to grow it beyond the level that it's at now. They've got a lot of competition in summer. With cricket, with basketball is actually a summer sport, so is soccer. So they've got a lot of competition. So I'm not sure. It can definitely grow, but I'm not sure how big it can get. It's not going to be a top sport down there by any means.
You really enjoyed your year there, didn't you?
It was amazing, and the country's awesome. The people are super friendly. The wildlife, I mean, all the the dangerous animals, the cool animals, the kangaroos, the koalas. It was amazing.
Well, the great thing, Dave, about this show, sports and stuff, we can get into kangaroos and everything, so we can mix it up a little beyond sports too.
Yeah.
Dave, what are real quickly? We're kind of winding down. Well, we have another minute or two, Lucius, I think. But Dave, when you were obviously the internet has played a role in changing the sports ticket industry since you started in the mid '90s. Any other changes you've seen in the last 20, 25 years you can throw in? Obviously, internet's a major change, but any other changes you've seen in the industry?
Internet, which has led to the secondary market. So there's, every team and university is fighting the secondary market on a daily basis, trying to figure out how to embrace it or send it away, or anything that has to do with scalping or brokers. I mean, that's a big topic that's still ongoing, and I really think it's about the mobile phone. So a lot of ticket companies are working on making improvements for the mobile experience, and in the next 5 years, I'd be surprised if they're still printing tickets. It's all going to be on your phone.
Dave, those are really good points. I mean, this little phone thing we have is just amazing. It's like a limb now. It's
It
just
sure
such
is.
a role. Well, Dave, we have less than a minute left, and I've really enjoyed having you on, and I've wanted to get you on for a while, so thanks for coming to the studio to do this interview. What does the future hold for Dave Gravenkemper?
Well, it's a great question. I spent some time at the Sports Commission, which is a great experience to get back in the sporting community here in Seattle. But down deep, my career is based around tickets and ticket sales and customer service. So that's my goal, is to find another position. Could be the new NHL team. Fingers crossed on that. But I want to get back get my career going again in ticket sales. I've been doing some consulting on the side, so that's been fun too.
Well, Dave, you've had so many positions for so many different sports franchises. Great position at University of Washington. Great position in Australia. The list goes on. I'm sure you're going to find something terrific, and it's just been a lot of fun to have you on and get a little bird's eye view of the sports ticketing industry. And obviously, you and I will continue to be in touch.
Anytime, Paul. Thanks for
David.
having me.
You take care.